The wind came dry and low, kicking up little flurries of dust across the dead prairie. A mother and daughter trudged slow beside a fence of crooked posts, nothing behind them but miles of silence and sunburned memory. Her name was Ruth, though no one had called her that in weeks, maybe longer. The girl beside her, no more than 7, answered only to Bertie these days. Ruth called her that for the way she always tilted her head, as if listening for things no one else could hear. They stopped by a warped fence post where a single worm-chewed apple had rolled out of a canvas sack, discarded in the grass. Bertie reached for it like it was gold. Ruth hesitated. Disease, rot risk, but said nothing. Hunger spoke louder than reason. The child sank her teeth into it, juice trailing down her chin like sap from a wounded tree. Ruth squatted beside her, legs shaking from the walk, and took the other half. The apple was sour and mealy, but she swallowed it like a prayer. Across the field, a barn leaned into the dusk, ribs exposed where planks had splintered from years of wind and no repair. The house nearby was barely more than a silhouette, square frame, chimney puffing faint smoke. A man watched him from the barn's shadow, rifle in hand but not raised. Ruth saw him and straightened slow. No good ever came of a white man with a gun and a quiet look, but her feet didn't move. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was emptiness, so deep even fear couldn't fill it. Bertie kept chewing, staring back at him like he was just another tree. The man stepped forward. His boots were caked in old mud, spurs jingling with the smallest movement. He looked to be mid-30s, tall and pale like a winter sky, with a face carved from silence and something darker. Not cruelty, not yet, but the memory of it, maybe. He didn't say a word, just looked at them for a long time, then shrugged out his long gray coat, walked forward, dusted it off once, then bent and draped it around Bertie's shoulders. She froze, then blinked up at him, the coat hanging heavy around her thin arms like armor too big for its night. Ruth stepped forward fast. "Don't touch her." "I didn't," he said, voice low, dry as riverbed gravel. "Just the coat." "What do you want?" He nodded toward the barn. "Come in. It's cold tonight." Ruth stared hard at him. There was no ask in his voice, only statement, like the wind telling you it's about to howl. She looked down at Bertie, whose fingers gripped the coat's edge tight. They followed him inside. The barn smelled of hay and old tobacco. A lantern burned on a wooden crate, its light flickering against the walls, throwing shadows like ghosts trying to remember themselves. The man walked over to a cast-iron stove and opened it. Firelight kissed his face, revealing a scar that ran from his jaw to the base of his ear, a long, pale seam. He pulled a pot from the stove, poured stew, thick with beans, bits of pork, and pepper, into 2 dented tin bowls, set them down and walked away, leaving space. Ruth crouched beside her daughter. "Slow," she whispered. But Bertie didn't need telling. She ate with quiet, desperate bites, eyes darting to the man every few seconds. He lit a roll of tobacco and sat on an overturned crate, watching them, not unkind, but distant. "You got a name?" he asked finally. "No," Ruth said. He blew out smoke. "Fair enough." A long silence stretched between them, not awkward, just full. Ruth spoke. "You live out here alone?" He nodded once. "This your land?" "Not really," he said. "It belonged to someone. Don't think he needs it now." Ruth tilted her head. "You kill him for it?" He looked at her then. Not angry, not defensive, just tired. "No, but I didn't cry when he died." They said nothing for a while after that. The wind tapped on the barn's boards like a hesitant knock. "Where you headed?" he asked. Ruth wiped Bertie's mouth with her sleeve. "Away." "Away don't exist," he said. "Just turns into another somewhere." Ruth didn't reply. She knew he was right, but she'd keep walking all the same, once her legs worked again. Bertie had curled up in the corner near the stove, head resting on the coat. Her breath was soft and even. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't shivering. "You running?" the man asked, voice quieter now. Ruth's gaze stayed on her daughter. "We survived." "Survived what?" She looked at him. Firelight flickered in her eyes. "All of it. He nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. He stood, walked to a nearby shelf, and pulled down a wool blanket. He didn't offer it, just sat within reach and walked back. Ruth looked down at her hands. Blistered, bruised, stronger than they had any right to be. "I'm Ruth," she said finally. He gave the barest smile. "Name's Eli." Another silence. Comfortable now. "You got kin?" she asked. "Did," he replied. "Wife and boy. Fever took him. Long while back." Ruth didn't offer sympathy. She just nodded. "Ain't fair." "No," he said. "Ain't." The stove crackled. Outside, the wind carried coyotes' howls across the plains. "You can stay in here tonight," Eli said. "Barn's warmer than it looks. Roof don't leak much." Ruth looked at him long and hard. "Why help us?" He stared at the fire. "'Cause I ain't always been worth saving. But someone did it anyway. Seems right to pay it forward." Ruth leaned back, closing her eyes. For once, she didn't dream of screams. Just wind, just smoke, just a girl's breath and the smell of stew and wood fire. And a strange thought, warm and unwelcome as sunrise. Maybe they could rest here, just for a day. Maybe two. She didn't trust Eli. Not yet, but she didn't hate him either. Not yet, and that was enough. Morning crept in beneath the warped slats of the barn roof, painting thin stripes of light across the straw-covered floor. Ruth stirred before the sun was fully risen, one arm protectively draped over Bertie. Her eyes snapped open like a soldier's, body still halfway caught in the rhythm of running. But there was no shouting, no smoke, no men with dogs, only the faint scent of wood smoke and dust, and the creaking bones of an old building trying to hold itself together. Eli was already outside. She heard the clean, rhythmic thud of his axe splitting wood, steady as a metronome. Ruth rose and stepped carefully over Bertie, wrapping Eli's coat around her shoulders. It still smelled faintly of smoke and something she couldn't name, maybe saddle oil, maybe rain long dried. She stepped out into the early chill and watched him for a long minute. He was stripped down to a linen undershirt soaked with sweat, arms moving like a machine, but eyes lost in thought. His movements had a quiet violence to them, like he was cutting more than wood. Like each swing was a kind of confession. He glanced up, but didn't stop. "You sleep?" "Didn't mean to," she said. "Good." She didn't know what to make of that. He wasn't trying to make her comfortable, and he wasn't threatening her either. Just speaking plain, as if that were rare enough to be a kindness. "Your daughter," he said after a moment. "She's a quiet one. She listens more than she talks." Smart girl. Ruth moved close to the fence post and leaned on it, crossing her arms. She used to sing. Before. Eli paused mid-swing, axe resting against a stump. "Before what?" She looked out at the empty land. "Before everything turned." He didn't push, just nodded and went back to work. Later, they ate under the barn's awning. Ruth sat on an overturned crate, while Bertie picked at a biscuit. Eli brought out a pot of boiled eggs and dried apples. The food wasn't much, but it didn't taste of ash or desperation, and that alone made it feel sacred. Bertie surprised them both by offering Eli half her biscuit. He raised an eyebrow but accepted it with a nod, tearing it gently and eating in slow, appreciative bites. Ruth watched him. What kind of man lives out here alone? Eli chewed, swallowed. The kind that got tired of being around people. She waited. He didn't elaborate. "What happened to your family?" He stared down at the tin cup in his hands. "Fever came through one winter. Took my boy first. Wife followed. Couldn't stop it. I'm sorry." He shrugged, but his eyes were somewhere far off. "I was too late. Always been a little late." Bertie leaned against her mother, then climbed into her lap. Her breath tickled Ruth's collarbone, a soft, warm reminder of why she hadn't laid down and quit in the swamp. Why she kept walking through blistered soles and cracked lips. "You got someone coming after you?" Eli asked suddenly. Ruth tensed. "You a skin for your sake or ours?" "Both." She looked down at Bertie, then back at him. "There's men who think a woman like me shouldn't breathe, unless she's told to. And they don't much like that I took what they think was theirs." Eli didn't flinch. "You kill one of them, No, she said. Then, after a beat, but I wanted to. His voice was quiet. That one don't go away easy. No, she agreed. It don't. They sat like that for a long time. 3 people tied together by things they didn't say. By sundown, Ruth had helped gather eggs from a chicken coop behind the house and watched Bertie play with an old stick horse she'd found in the corner of the barn. The girls' laughter rang out sharp and clear, like a bell breaking a long silence. Eli stood by the porch of the house, cleaning his rifle with calm precision. Ruth walked over slowly. "She's laughing," he said without looking up. "First time I heard that sound in this place in a long while." "She's a good girl," Ruth said. "She deserves more than this." "You both do." Ruth studied him, unsure whether to trust the softness in his tone. "You don't know what we've done." "Don't care," Eli said. "You're here. That's enough for me." A gust of wind rolled across the plains, carrying the scent of dirt and horses and old blood. Ruth wrapped the coat tighter around herself. "You ever think about leaving this place?" she asked. Eli's eyes lifted to the horizon. "Used to. Then I figured I'd done too much damage to deserve anything better." "You think I haven't?" "I think you're still running." "I already stopped." They stood there as the sky turned to fire and the sun dipped low. Bertie ran circles around the barn, shouting nonsense to the wind. "She's going to get us caught, loud as she is," Ruth muttered. Eli gave a rare smile. "Let her be a child while she can." The smile faded quickly. Ruth followed his gaze. A shape on the distant ridge, a small figure on horseback, barely more than a smudge against the last light of day. Eli's body stiffened. He handed her the rifle without a word. "You shoot?" he asked. "Yes," she said. He nodded and went to fetch his own. They didn't run, just stood in silence, waiting for the shape to fade, to move, to announce its purpose. But the rider didn't come closer. Not yet. Bertie stood still behind Ruth, sensing the change in air. "Time to go inside," Ruth whispered, gripping her daughter's hand. As she turned, Eli's voice stopped her. "You can stay a few more nights, if you want." She hesitated. The rider was still watching. The wind had changed, and something in her, something half dead, was beginning to stir. She nodded once. "We'll stay, but if that rider comes closer." "We fight," Eli said. The sun vanished, and the dark crept in. The morning broke slow and red, like a warning scrawled across the sky. Ruth was already up, boots laced, rifle cradled in her arms. She hadn't slept, not really, just sat by the barn door all night, listening to the wind run its fingers through the long grass. Eli had left her the rifle without a word. That alone told her more than he ever had. Inside the barn, Bertie slept curled beneath the coat, her small hand tucked beneath her cheek. For a few hours, she was untouched by the fear clawing through Ruth's chest. Eli stood near the house, watching the horizon with eyes narrowed against the sun. He'd spotted the rider again before dawn. Closer this time, slower, like a man hunting, but not in a hurry. The kind who knew his prey had nowhere else to go. "He ain't alone," Eli muttered when Ruth joined him. "No man watches that long unless he's waiting on others." "Then we don't wait." Her voice was quiet but steady. "We leave tonight, before dark." Eli didn't answer right away. His jaw twitched, thumb tapping the side of his revolver. "There's a trail through the ravine," he said finally. "Hidden. Hard ride, but it'll keep us out of sight till morning." Ruth nodded. She didn't thank him. This wasn't charity. It was survival, same as before. By midday, they packed light. Ruth bundled food into burlap sacks. Dried beans, smoked meat, stale bread. Bertie helped without complaint, her eyes too serious for a child. Eli moved with the precision of a man who'd done this before, once or maybe too many times. As the sun dipped behind the hills, they led the mule cart toward the edge of Eli's land. Dust rose behind them, silent clouds that caught the fading light, like ghosts trying to speak. Half a mile out, Ruth felt in her spine first. Wrongness, stillness that didn't belong. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats. Fast. Purposeful. Too many for a chance encounter. Ruth spun around just as the first shot cracked through the dusk. The mule screamed and bolted, yanking the reins from Eli's grip. The cart tipped, spilling food and supplies into the dirt. Birdie shrieked and dropped low, arms over her head. Ruth dropped beside her, rifle already up. 3 riders thundered down the ridge. Dust cloaked their faces, but Ruth recognized a red sash on one, like the kind worn by the men who had burned her home. The man in front held a shotgun and wore a smile too wide, too calm. "Well, I'll be," he drawled. "Didn't think we'd catch you this far west." Eli stepped forward, pistol drawn but lowered. "Turn around. You don't want this fight." The man's smile grew. "Ain't talking to you, stranger. I'm here for her." Ruth raised a rifle. "Careful now," the man warned. "Wouldn't want your little girl getting caught in a mess." Eli didn't wait. His pistol barked once. The lead rider jerked and fell sideways, boot caught in the stirrup. His horse panicked, dragged him in a wild circle before breaking loose and vanishing into the scrub. The others opened fire. Ruth grabbed Birdie and rolled behind the cart's wreckage. Wood splinters bit into her arms as bullets tore through the boards. She fired back once, heard a grunt, but didn't check. Eli shouted something, then went silent. Gunfire cracked like thunder, echoed off stone. Then nothing, only wind again. Ruth waited, counted her breath. 5 seconds. 10. Then she stood. Eli was kneeling beside the wagon, hand pressed to his ribs, red seeping through his shirt. One of the riders was dead on the ground, face turned toward the sky. The third was gone, fled or hiding, no way to know. Birdie ran to Ruth, burying her face in her mother's stomach. Ruth held her close, breathing in the girl's warmth like it might keep her steady. Eli coughed, wincing. "Didn't think they hit me that quick." "You can ride?" Ruth asked. "For now." He gritted his teeth. "Just don't let me fall off." They gathered what they could, less than they had before. No food, no clean water, just a rifle, a pistol, a blood-soaked shirt, and a mule that still trembled from the chaos. They took the ravine path under cover night, stars spinning like quiet witnesses overhead. Ruth led the mule. Birdie rode beside her, hands tight around her waist. Eli sat slumped on the back of the cart, eyes glassy but breathing steady. No one spoke. The silence wasn't peace. It was aftermath. Ruth knew that kind of quiet. It came after fire, after death, but it also came before something else, before change. Sometime before dawn, Ruth looked back. The ridge was empty. No torchlight, no shadows. Whoever had fled hadn't returned. Still, her fingers never loosened on the rifle. They stopped in a grove of cottonwoods. The branches swayed above them, whispering soft secrets. Ruth helped Eli down. He collapsed onto a patch of grass, sweat beading on his forehead. "You gonna make it?" she asked. He looked up at her and grinned, teeth red. "Ain't dead yet." She smiled despite herself, sat beside him. Birdie curled against her leg, already half asleep. "You could have let them take me," Ruth said. "Would have been easier." Eli's eyes fluttered shut. "Maybe, but then I'd still be alone." His voice faded into sleep. Ruth leaned back against a tree, eyes wide open, watching the darkness shift between trunks. She wasn't sure where they'd go next, but the man bleeding beside her had chosen her side. And now, she wasn't running alone. The sky was still ink-dark when Ruth stirred. The fire reduced to faint orange embers flickering low under the cottonwoods. Eli hadn't moved much in hours, but his breath rattled steady, shallow, like it was clinging to him out of stubbornness alone. Birdie lay curled beside him, one tiny hand on his shoulder, as if her touch alone could pin his soul in place. Ruth rose and tightened the blanket around her daughter, then checked Eli's bandage. The bleeding had slowed, but infection waited like a wolf in the trees. They had nothing but river water and prayers to keep it at bay. She packed what little they had left. The mule was still tethered nearby, its eyes wide and watchful, ears flicking at invisible things. The road ahead was narrow and overgrown, winding through gullies and brush, so thick a man could vanish inside it forever. And that's what she meant to do. Vanish. Burn the old name. Carry the child and the broken man, and whatever life might still cling to them. far past memory and consequence. By noon, they'd moved deeper into the hills, away from tracks, away from bloodstains. The world grew quiet again, uneasy quiet, like something was watching. It wasn't until the creek crossing that she knew they weren't alone. A rifle cracked from the tree line. The bullet struck the earth inches from Bertie's boot. She screamed and fell. Ruth dove on top of her, shielding the girl with her body. Eli tried to stand, but fell to one knee, gritting his teeth. Thought, I smelled you coming. The voice came from across the water, dry, nasal, proud. One rider. The third one. The one who ran. He rode slowly down from the trees, rifle raised, his coat catching the wind like a flag made of skin and dust. There was no one with him now, just the swagger of a man who thought the kill would be easy. I ain't here for talking, he said. That girl's mine by rights. And the woman? She's a thief. Took from men better than me. Ruth stood slowly, putting herself between him and Bertie. Her hand rested on the revolver at her hip. She ain't yours, she said, voice sharp as flint. And neither am I. The man smirked. You think you're the first to stand up like that? Always ends the same. Eli moved behind her, one arm cradling his ribs. His gun hung heavy in his hand, but he raised it anyway. Might be her last end, though. The rider laughed. You? Bleeding like a stuck hog and can barely stand. Ruth stepped forward. He ain't the one you need to fear. And then she drew. The shot cracked like a whip in the dry air. The recoil rang up her arm, steady and sure. The rider jerked back, rifle slipping from his hands. He wobbled in the saddle, then slumped sideways, crashing into the creek like a sack of stone. She didn't blink, just breathed in deep. The smell of gunpowder, the heat of blood that wasn't hers, the quiet that followed. Eli collapsed onto a rock, groaning. Bertie rushed to him, arms circling his neck as if she could hold him together by force. Ruth stood a moment longer, staring down at the man who had chased her across 3 counties, who had branded her with fear, who had taken everything but this. She didn't feel triumph, only quiet, a stillness that reached all the way into her bones. They buried him beneath the stones by the creek. No prayers, no names, just weight and earth and the closing of a chapter she never asked to write. That night, they camped beneath the open sky. Ruth stitched Eli's wound with thread pulled from her own hem. He bit down on a stick, sweating through the pain. You could go on without me, he said. Take the girl. Get far. She didn't answer until the thread was done and the blood stopped flowing. You told me once, she said, you were tired of being alone. I was, he muttered. You're not anymore. He looked at her, eyes soft in the firelight. No, I guess I'm not. Weeks passed. The land softened as they traveled west. The rocks gave way to trees, then to green hills where rivers bent gentle and deer wandered like ghosts through the mist. Eventually, they found a place, an old trapper's cabin half buried in moss. Walls still sturdy, roof not yet caved. Ruth patched it. Eli chopped the wood. Bertie planted seeds in a garden that didn't care who she was, only that her hands were gentle. They didn't speak of the past. Not often. Sometimes at night, Eli would trace the edge of a scar and murmur a name he no longer remembered. Sometimes Ruth would wake with a cry in her throat, and Eli would touch her shoulder and say nothing at all. That was enough. One morning, Ruth sat on the porch, watching the sky shift from silver to blue, a coffee tin warming in her hands. Bertie was chasing chickens barefoot in the yard, laughing with a sound so light it made Ruth's throat ache. Eli stepped out, hair still damp, bandage tucked beneath a clean shirt. Feels like home, he said. She nodded. It is. He held something out to her, an old tin star, edges rusted. A marshal's badge, once polished, now dull as a forgotten promise. Found it in my saddlebag, he said. Figure I'd leave it here. Let it be part of the bones of this place. She took it from him and nailed it to the wall above the door. A warning, a memorial, a beginning. The wind blew soft across the porch, carrying the scent of soil, firewood, and the sweet warmth of apple pie cooling on the sill. Inside, a fire crackled. Not for fear, not for survival, but simply because it could. And in that quiet place beyond pursuit, beyond names and ashes, a woman, a man, and a little girl who once had nothing began again. Together,